Hello, dear story lovers and night owls. A very warm welcome to the Sleepy Chronicler. If you appreciate a good narrative to cradle your thoughts before sleep, or just to take a relaxing break, you already know what to do. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share it with those who also deserve a moment of tranquility. Now, make yourself as comfortable as possible, close your eyes if you wish, and let the story carry you away. You wake up not to the annoyingly cheerful chirp of a digital alarm clock, a relic from a time when people had commitments that didn't just involve not being devoured by something with more teeth than common sense, but to the familiar creak of your shelter's metal, which seems to protest against the morning breeze with the same energy as a civil servant on a Monday. Your home, sweet home, is an old-school bus, tipped on its side like a tired giant who decided to take a nap and never got up again. The once vibrant yellow paint is now a patchwork of rust, dirt, and the occasional graffiti by someone who, even in the face of civilization's collapse, felt the need to draw something anatomically incorrect. Art endures, doesn't it? The interior is what you might call organized chaos, if you were being generous, or a hoarder's nest with aspirations, if you were being honest. There's a pile of salvaged books you swear you'll read someday, right after you discover the cure for loneliness or how to make decent coffee with roasted roots. Cans of dubious origin food, Chef Prepper's surprise stew, a faded label reads, and the surprise, you suspect, is finding out which part of the animal, or plant, or mineral is in there. Share space with improvised tools and an impressive collection of useless trinkets that, for some reason, you can't bring yourself to throw away. That one-eyed rubber ducky? Essential for morale. The broken snow globe showing an Eiffel Tower that never really existed in that shade of pink. A reminder of the fragility of dreams, or something to that effect. You haven't decided yet. Your bones crack in protest as you sit up on your mattress, a heap of old fabrics that has seen more action as fifth-rate theatre curtains than as a bed. The morning air wafts in through the broken windows, patched with plastic and duct tape that has long since lost faith in its own adhesive. It carries the characteristic scent of the new world, a mixture of damp earth, rusted metal, the distant, vague promise of acid rain, and something faintly reminiscent of burnt barbecue. You prefer not to dwell on that last part. The first task of the day, as always, is to check your traps. You've scattered them in a generous perimeter around the bus, more out of habit and stubborn optimism than any real expectation of success. They are pathetic contraptions, made with found barbed wire, branches, and the hope that some unsuspecting rodent with suicidal tendencies will decide your snare is a good place for a last breath. Today, like most days, the traps are empty, save for a particularly bold leaf that has entangled itself there, mocking your hunting skills. You stare at it with the gravity of a defeated general. "Well played, leaf," you mutter, before moving on to the next item on your luxurious morning routine. Water, the nectar of the gods, or in your case, the brownish liquid you collect from the rain when it doesn't look capable of dissolving the bucket, and pass through a filter made with layers of sand, charcoal from past fires, and a piece of fabric that might once have been a t-shirt from your favorite band from a distant, noisy past. The process is slow, meditative even. If your idea of meditation involves constant worry about dysentery, every drop is precious, a small miracle, preventing your internal organs from going on a general strike. Then, coffee. You use generous mental quotation marks here. It's a concoction of roasted roots, some suspicious seeds, and a healthy dose of faith. The result is a dark, bitter brew that has the merit of being hot and giving the illusion that you're participating in a civilized ritual. You sip it slowly, sitting on the steps of the bus, watching the morning sun try to break through the persistent fog that blankets the ruins of what was once a generic suburb. Now, it's just a tangle of cracked concrete, skeletons of houses, and trees that seem to have given up on reaching for the sky and decided to spread out anarchically instead. The silence is vast, broken only by the wind and your own thoughts, which tend to range from "what's for lunch" to Am I the last minimally sane human on this planet? Boredom is a constant companion, a sort of invisible parasite that feeds on your sanity. You try to combat it with short expeditions into the surroundings. Nothing too adventurous, just enough to stretch your legs and, who knows, find something that isn't further proof that humanity had a special talent for screwing things up. Today, your wanderings lead you to a pile of rubble that seems to have been a small convenience store, the kind that sold cigarettes, magazines about celebrities who have probably turned to dust, and chips with more chemicals than a pharmaceutical lab. Most of it has already been picked over, looted, or simply disintegrated with time. But, tucked under a twisted metal beam, something catches your eye. It's not food, nor a tool. It's a rectangular object, covered in soot and with scorched edges. Carefully, you pull it out. It appears to be a diary, or perhaps a notebook. Many pages are destroyed, but some, in the middle, seem to have survived whatever happened there. And, from a nearly disintegrated side pocket, a small metallic device slips out, thin as an old credit card, with a dark, cracked screen. You turn it over in your hands. Useless, probably, like almost everything. But then, as you press an almost invisible indentation on the side, a tiny light blinks in the corner of the screen. Once, twice. Faint, hesitant, like a whispered cry for help in the middle of a nightmare, with your heart giving a small, perhaps exaggerated, leap. After all, strong emotions are a luxury you don't usually allow yourself. Like hot baths or meals with more than one recognizable ingredient, you take your new treasures back to the relative safety of the school bus. Relative being the operative word, considering the only thing stopping the outside world from coming in is a jammed door, and your reputation for having terrible musical taste, should any intruder, with auditory discernment approach. You place the scorched diary and the metallic device on an overturned crate that serves as a table, chair, and occasionally an altar for silent pleas for a day without soot rain. The sunlight, filtered through the dirty plastic of the window, falls on the objects, giving them an air of importance they probably don't deserve. But, in the crushing boredom of your existence, any crumb of mystery is a feast. First, the device. It's thin, elegant, in a way only useless things can be. After the apocalypse, the little light still blinks, stubbornly, a small green LED, an electronic sigh in a forcibly analog world. You try everything, pressing other corners, sliding your fingers across the cracked screen hoping for a magical touch, cursing in 3 different languages, 2 of which you invented on the spot. Nothing. The technology of the old world, as you dramatically call the pre-collapse era in your head, was notoriously dependent on things like stable electricity, the internet, and instruction manuals that weren't used to light fires. Things that are now as rare as an honest politician. Maybe it needs a charge, you think, with the kind of optimism that precedes a major disappointment. You look around your shelter. Your power system consists of a salvaged car battery, which can barely power a single light bulb for a few hours. And that's when it's in a good mood. Connecting this delicate piece of e-waste to it seems like the equivalent of trying to bathe a cat using a fire hose. Still, you examine the device for any charging port. There's a tiny slit, so thin it looks more like a design flaw. Nothing resembling the Jurassic USB cables you occasionally find, tangled like fossilized snakes. Frustrated with the stubborn electronics, you turn to the diary. The smell of burnt paper is strong, almost nostalgic, if nostalgia could reek of disaster. The edges of the pages are black and brittle, crumbling to the touch. You handle them with the delicacy of someone disarming a bomb, or trying not to wake a particularly irritable baby, both equally dangerous, in their own way. The handwriting, where still legible, is rushed, almost frantic. Thin, slanted strokes, as if the person was writing while running from something, or perhaps just in a great hurry to jot down a cake recipe before the inspiration, or the ingredients, disappeared. Many words are blurred by water or time. You manage to decipher fragments. Signal still weak. Everyone headed to the meeting point. Beware of the Watchers. Watchers? That sounds pleasantly sinister, like the name of a progressive metal band that takes itself way too seriously. Another page, more intact. Aurora. They call it Aurora. They say. There's clean water, crops, a chance. I have to believe. Coordinates unstable. Follow the dry river east. Look for the Broken Sun landmark. Aurora. A name that evokes images of new beginnings, rosy skies, and probably a huge letdown at the end of the rainbow. The dry river sounds more in line with current reality. And Broken Sun landmark? Poetic, but terribly vague. It could be anything from a specific rock formation to an ironically positioned traffic sign. You spend hours poring over those few sentences, trying to extract some coherent meaning, like an archaeologist examining the hieroglyphs of a long-lost civilization that apparently had a fetish for ellipses. The combination of the diary and the blinking device begins to form an unsettling idea in your mind, an idea that looks dangerously like hope, that stubborn weed that always sprouts back, no matter how many times you pull it. Could the device be a location transmitter? A key? A very sophisticated paperweight? The little light continues its methodical blinking, ignoring your conjectures. Maybe it's just a low battery warning that's been going on for decades. A final, prolonged technological goodbye. Hesitation settles in you like dampness in winter. Go? Stay? Here, in your overturned bus, you have a routine, a predictable, albeit miserable, survival, out there. Well, out there are watchers, dry rivers, and the promise of an aurora that might just as well be the name of a new type of hallucinogenic fungus. Skepticism, your old, reliable companion, whispers that it's a trap, the delirium of a dying person, or worse, an elaborate joke by some bored survivor with a particularly cruel sense of humor. But then, there's that other whisper, older, more persistent, the one that asks, what if? What if there really is a better place? What if Aurora isn't just a mirage of dust and despair? The thought of spending the rest of your life rationing surprise stew and talking to leaves caught in traps suddenly seems a bit more depressing than usual. You look at the device. The little green light blinks. 1, 2, and then, as if it had gathered its last strength for a final performance, it blinks 3 times in quick succession, a little brighter, before going out completely. An electronic silence descends upon the small device. Strangely, this final extinguishing seems more like a sign than the constant blinking, a kind of ultimatum, as if to say, the information has been given. The window of opportunity, if it ever existed, is closing. Make up your mind, you indecisive primate. You stare at the darkness of the screen, standing still, slowly decaying in the uncomfortable comfort of the known, suddenly seems the greatest risk of all. Maybe the owner of that diary didn't make it. Maybe Aurora is a myth. But the alternative, the certainty of your monotonous, futureless present, is a prospect that begins to weigh more heavily than any unknown danger. With a sigh that seems to carry the weight of all your 19 poorly lived springs, a decision begins to form, as inevitable as the next dubious meal. The decision, once made, settles with the weight of an anvil and the lightness of a feather simultaneously. A curious combination, you reflect, as you gaze at the interior of your bus, now with the eyes of someone about to move from a mediocre apartment into the unknown. What to bring to a picnic in hell? Or being optimistic, for an uncertain trek towards a place that may or may not have potable water and people who won't try to turn you into barbecue. The question is more philosophical than practical, but your rumbling stomach reminds you that philosophy doesn't fill bellies. You begin the selection process with the rigor of a museum curator deciding which relics to save from a fire. Except, in your case, the relics are things like a slightly bent crowbar, which you've affectionately nicknamed Final Argument, and a pot that has served for cooking, digging, and once, for scaring off a particularly bold opossum. Multi-purpose is the watchword in the post-apocalyptic wardrobe and kitchen. Your backpack, a survivor of countless expeditions to looted department stores, seems to look at you with a mixture of exhaustion and expectation. You start to fill it. First, the essentials. Your improvised water filter, a masterpiece of jerry-rigging. The flint that has saved you from cold nights and dark thoughts. A roll of twine that seems to have come directly from the inventory of a MacGyver-esque scout. And your Swiss Army knife, which is only Swiss in its stubborn refusal to break, despite the abuse. Food is a chapter unto itself. You contemplate your meager reserves. That can of peaches in syrup, saved for a special occasion. Is this the occasion? Or would it be better to save it to celebrate arriving at Aurora, should it not be a death trap or a collective delusion? Ah, the difficult decisions of modern life. You decide that hope deserves a little sugar and place it in the backpack with the solemnity of someone stowing away a crown jewel. A few protein bars of unidentified origin. Better not to ask. The taste is punishment enough. A bag of nuts and dried fruits that look to be about the same age as you, and a small bar of dark chocolate, as hard as your chances of success, but still counting as chocolate. Luxuries. Weapons. Besides Final Argument, you have a hunting knife that looks more intimidating than it actually is, and a makeshift crossbow you built following a manual found in a hobby magazine for maladjusted teenagers. Its accuracy is questionable. You hit a tree trunk once, from 10 feet away. The squirrel you were aiming at probably died laughing. But, in a world where the appearance of danger can be as effective as actual danger, it has its value. And of course, there's your sharp intellect and your cutting sarcasm. But those don't weigh down the backpack, thankfully. You scan the diary one more time, memorizing the few clues. Dry river to the east. Broken sun landmark. As useful as an astrological chart for navigating a minefield. You tuck the diary and the now silent device into an inner pocket, like amulets of a newfound and highly dubious faith. The mental map of known dangers in the region unfolds in your head. The area east of the old interstate highway, avoided because of the dust hounds, a pack of feral mutts that have developed a taste for unwary travelers, and a communication system that would make a special ops team envious. The ruins of the old industrial complex, where, according to rumors, strange things happen at night, and strange things, in your dictionary, rarely means free ice cream festival. And, of course, the most unpredictable danger of all, other humans. Some might offer small talk and a fair trade. Others might want your shoes, your food, and possibly your internal organs, not necessarily in that order. It's always a lottery, and you've never been good at games of chance. The moment comes to say goodbye to your metallic refuge. You look around, at the one-eyed rubber ducky, at the pile of unread books, at the stains on the wall that tell stories of old leaks and present loneliness. This bus, with all its discomfort and rust, has been a silent witness to your survival. There's a strange pang in your chest, something dangerously resembling affection. Pathetic, you think, getting attached to an old tin can. But, in the end, it was your old tin can. You give your things one last adjustment. Check if the bus door is as locked as possible, which means propping a heavy piece of metal against it. It won't stop anyone determined, but it might discourage the casual thief or the opportunistic opossum. With the backpack weighing on your shoulders like the sum of all your bad decisions, you pause on the steps. The morning air is cold, but there's a promise of sun behind the heavy clouds. A new day, a new path, a new chance for everything to go spectacularly wrong. The mixture of anxiety and an almost childlike excitement bubbles inside you, like a forgotten soda that someone decided to shake vigorously. What the hell am I doing? You ask yourself, but the question is rhetorical. You already know the answer. Anything is better than waiting for the end, sitting down. With a final glance at the yellow bus, an almost imperceptible nod, you turn. The path ahead is uncertain, probably full of potholes, both literal and metaphorical, but it is a path. And, for the first time in a long time, you're not just surviving the day, you're moving towards something, even if that something is just the next mirage. You take the first step, then another. The gravel crunches under your worn boots. The morning sun, finally breaking through the clouds, paints the sky in shades of orange and pink, colors too beautiful for such a messed up world. Colors that promise both beauty and an unknown danger on the horizon stretching out before you. The first few days on the road are a blur of cracked asphalt, oppressive silence, and the constant company of your own thoughts, which, let's be honest, isn't always the best company. You head east, keeping the morning sun to your left and the vague hope of finding that dry river somewhere on the increasingly dusty horizon. The diary's instructions are as precise as a horoscope, but lacking a divine GPS or a map not in tatters, it's the best you've got. The roads, once pulsating arteries of a hurried civilization, are now just scars on the landscape. The asphalt is a mosaic of cracks where stubborn vegetation insists on sprouting. Small green flags of nature's surrender to human stupidity. Cars are abandoned on the verges, metallic skeletons frozen in time. Many with their doors open, like astonished mouths. Their interiors ransacked, or strangely intact, as if the driver had just stepped out for cigarettes and forgotten to return for a few decades. You peek inside some, out of morbid curiosity and the remote possibility of finding something useful. Mostly, you find only dust, mold, and small shrines dedicated to oblivion. A faded photo on the dashboard, a child's toy on the back seat, a roadmap of a world that no longer exists, with destinations that are now just names in ruins. Sometimes, you catch yourself imagining the stories behind those objects, the last hours of those people. Was it panic? Resignation? Or just the tedious normality of any given Tuesday, interrupted by the apocalypse that nobody saw coming until it was banging on the door with a crowbar? Your thoughts wander through these scenarios, a way to pass the time, to fill the silence that is only broken by the creak of your backpack, the sound of your footsteps, and the melancholic song of the wind whistling through the broken windows of distant buildings. You develop a travel routine, a cautious dance with the unknown. Wake before dawn, eat a rationed portion of your precious food, walk while there's light, find a discreet shelter before nightfall. Discreet usually means something that doesn't scream, lone, vulnerable traveler sleeping here, like an abandoned motel sign or the interior of a minivan with suspicious curtains. Your senses, once dulled by the false security of civilization, are now as sharp as a wild animal's. Every snap of a twig, every moving shadow, every strange smell in the air is analyzed, catalogued, classified as probably nothing, or run like the devil is on your heels with a timeshare offer. The nights are the hardest. The dark brings with it not only the cold, but also a palpable sense of vulnerability. You sleep fitfully, final argument, within reach, and one ear always pricked. Dreams, when they come, are a bizarre mix of fragmented memories from the world before. The smell of popcorn at the movies, the annoying buzz of social media notifications, the feel of hot water from the shower, and the anxieties of the present. Sometimes you dream of Aurora, imagining it as a verdant paradise. Other times, as a trap full of watchers, with very wide smiles and very sharp teeth. During the day, the landscape unfolds slowly. Small ghost towns appear on the horizon, their silhouettes stark against the pale sky. You traverse them cautiously, following the main streets covered in rubble and weeds. The shops are empty, their broken windows like blind eyes. The houses, with their kicked-in doors and shattered windows, seem to hold the silent echoes of the lives they once sheltered. Occasionally, you find a table set, as if the family was interrupted mid-meal, or toys scattered on a child's bedroom floor, frozen in a moment of play that never ended. They are glimpses of a past so recent, and yet as alien as an ancient civilization. There's a sad beauty to it all, a melancholy that clings to you like the fine dust that covers everything. Nature, indifferent to human dramas, is slowly reclaiming what is hers. Ivy climbs the walls of buildings, trees sprout in the middle of the asphalt, and the silence is filled with the song of birds that don't seem to mind the end of the world. You become a roadside philosopher, contemplating the great questions of life, the universe, and where to find your next unspoiled can of beans. What remains when everything is taken away? What's the point of continuing when the future is a blank page scribbled with question marks and little skulls? The answers are as elusive as a clever squirrel, but the act of asking, of thinking, keeps you sane, or at least functionally insane, which is something. Your humor, always a reliable defense mechanism, becomes even more acidic. You comment to yourself on the irony of finding a How to Live to 100 manual in a looted pharmacy, or on the questionable quality of post-apocalyptic street art, which seems to consist mainly of variations of "we're all screwed." Small, cynical observations that wring a bitter smile from you and help you not to succumb to the despair lurking at the edges of your consciousness. The days turn into a week, then almost two. The landscape begins to change subtly. The terrain becomes more arid, the vegetation scarcer. You still haven't found any dry river, which makes you question if the diary's author was drinking something stronger than water when they wrote that. Loneliness is a constant, but you get used to it, almost embrace it. It's safer this way. People are complicated. People are dangerous. Then, on a particularly grey afternoon, when you're starting to think that Aurora is just the name of a forgotten deodorant brand, and that you're on a fool's errand to nowhere, something breaks the monotony. A thin, dark line rising into the sky, many miles away, in the direction you're heading. You stop, squint. It's not a cloud, it's smoke. Deliberate, consistent smoke. The kind of smoke that can only mean one thing in this empty world: other humans. Your heart, that treacherous organ that insists on hoping, gives a leap. Whether this is good or bad, you don't know yet. But it is, undeniably, something. And something, after so much, nothing, is a noteworthy event. The next morning at the train station arrives with the smell of weak coffee, a luxury Jonas seemed to save for special occasions, like the arrival of a stranger who hadn't tried to kill them during the night, and the promise of a pale sun. The idea of companionship, which had flirted with you in the darkness, seems less appealing in the daylight. They have their routine, their fragile stability. You have your uncertain quest for Aurora. After a surprisingly cordial exchange of information and a rudimentary map, drawn by Sarah, on a piece of cardboard, indicating the general direction of the shattered mountains, and, more pertinently, the location of a relatively large town on the way, you decide to go your separate ways. If you reach those mountains and find anything other than rock and wind, send a carrier pigeon, Jonas grumbles, which you interpret as his version of good luck, and don't die. Sarah gives you a little more food than you expected, some dried potatoes, and what looks like smoked squirrel meat. Eli just watches you with those big eyes, the wooden bird still in his pocket like a small weight of uncertain meaning. With brief, though not hostile, farewells. A new record for your post-apocalyptic social interactions. You resume your journey. The town Sarah indicated, an old regional centre called Providence. The irony of pre-collapse names never ceases to amuse you. Would take a few more days of walking. According to her, there might be useful supplies there, if you knew where to look. And, more importantly, if you were willing to face the inherent dangers of any large concentration of ghosts and concrete, and dangers there are, you soon discover. Cities aren't just silent, they're treacherous. Buildings groan under their own weight, threatening to collapse with the next strong breeze. The ground often hides holes and unstable structures. And, of course, there are the other explorers, those who see in the ruins not a tomb, but a supermarket without checkouts or morals. You move like a ghost among ghosts, your footsteps echoing in the wide, empty avenues, flanked by skyscrapers that look like skeletal claws scratching the sky. Providence, when you finally reach it, is a testament to human ambition and its subsequent, spectacular failure. Once a place of commerce and life, now it's a labyrinth of silence and decay. You decide to focus your search on what looked like the old commercial district, perhaps a shopping mall, or an area with department stores, places that, in theory, would have a large concentration of, well, of everything, and therefore, of nothing that hasn't already been looted 10 times over. But hope, that stubborn thing, still whispers. After a morning dodging piles of rubble and cars that looked like they'd been chewed by a metallic giant, you find it, the Oasis Plaza. The name, painted in gigantic, faded letters above a shattered glass entrance, is of an almost cruel optimism. The interior is dark, the air heavy with the smell of mold, dust, and something vaguely chemical, as if cleaning products had fought one last battle against filth and lost badly. Sunlight streams in beams through holes in the ceiling, illuminating bizarre scenes. Mannequins toppled in contorted poses, like victims of a party gone very, very wrong. Stores with empty shelves, or with useless remnants. Phone cases for models extinct 50 years ago. Designer clothes now serving as nests for rats, who, by the way, seem to have impeccable taste in haute couture, and an impressive amount of processed food packaging, whose contents have long since turned into something that would make a scientist scratch their head. It's a dive into a recent and painfully obsolete past. You pass an old electronics store. The shelves, once crammed with the latest gadgets promising to connect you to everything and everyone, now display only empty boxes and broken screens. Televisions the size of small windows, smartphones that looked like pieces of magic glass, computers that fit in backpacks. So much technology, so much innovation, and none of it could prevent the inevitable, or even predict how quickly the connection would drop forever. You poke a tablet with the tip of your boot. It doesn't react. Surprising. The contrast between the useless sophistication of those objects and your basic needs. Clean water, food that won't kill you, a safe place to sleep, is almost comical. You wonder what the people of that era would think if they saw you, a ragged survivor, treating their precious devices like mere debris. They'd probably have a fit and try to sell you an extended warranty. In a bookstore, you find piles of books scattered on the floor, many damaged by moisture. Self-help manuals promising to transform your life in 30 days. Apparently, the apocalypse wasn't included in the package. Bestsellers about teenage vampires and billionaires with peculiar tastes. Travel guides to places that are now just coordinates on a map of dangers. You flip through a history book, stopping at a photo of what looked like a summit of world leaders, smiling and shaking hands. The caption spoke of a new future of cooperation and prosperity. You let out a dry laugh. Irony sometimes is the only thing that doesn't collapse. Despite the desolation, there's a strange beauty in the abandonment. The way the light falls on the dust, turning it into floating gold. The silence, so profound you can hear the blood pulsing in your ears. It's a museum of human failure, and you are the sole visitor, taking an unguided tour through the end of an era. Your search for practical supplies, however, is frustrating. Most food stores and pharmacies have been completely emptied, leaving only torn packaging and the ghost smell of disinfectant. But, in the back of a small convenience store, behind an overturned counter, you find a small treasure, a few cans of tuna. You check the expiration date, with the optimism of someone looking for life on Mars. But hunger is a great advisor. A miraculously intact package of saltine crackers, and, most valuable of all, an almost complete first aid kit, still in its plastic packaging. It seems someone forgot it in a hurry, or perhaps thought they wouldn't need band-aids where they were going. Lucky fool, you think, as you stow the items in your backpack with the reverence of someone who has found the Holy Grail. As you explore the second floor of the mall, where the food court used to be, a cemetery of overturned tables and plastic trays, a noise makes you freeze. It's not the wind, nor the creaking of the building. It's a metallic sound, a dragging, coming from one of the stores further ahead. Looters? Other survivors? Or just your imagination playing tricks on you again? You grip, final argument tighter. The melancholic tranquility of exploration vanishes, replaced by the cold adrenaline of uncertainty. The sound comes again. Closer. You hide behind a large plastic plant pot, which once housed an equally fake palm tree. And then, the sky outside, visible through a broken skylight, begins to darken rapidly. A sudden howling wind sweeps through the mall's corridors, bringing with it a smell of ozone and imminent rain. A storm, one of those violent, sudden storms that have become common, as if the planet itself were having a fit of rage. The metallic noise repeats, now accompanied by a loud creak, as if a large structure were about to give way. The Oasis Plaza, suddenly, no longer seems so inviting. It feels like a trap about to spring shut. The metallic noise and the howl of the storm transform into a sinister cacophony, and your survival instinct, the one that has kept you alive for 19 years in this rusty playground they call the world, screams a single word: run. Or maybe it was cover, but the message was clear. Staying there, in the exposed food court, with the ceiling threatening to join you for lunch, which you didn't have, was not a smart option. You move quickly, crouched. Final argument, held out in front like a timid battering ram. The metallic sound seems to come from a large department store at the end of the corridor, its concertina metal doors partially busted, creaking in the wind like an asthmatic giant. Was it the source of the noise? Or just another piece of the Oasis Plaza deciding to retire dramatically? You don't stay to find out. Your goal now is to find more solid shelter. A place where the ceiling doesn't look like it has ambitions of becoming the floor. The rain begins to fall outside. Not a gentle shower, but a furious torrent that drums on what remains of the mall's roof, with the fury of 1,000 unemployed drummers. You spot a sign, partially fallen but still legible. Providence Municipal Public Library, Oasis Plaza Branch. A library? Inside a mall? What a bizarre, pre-collapse, urban planning idea. But right now, it sounds like the most promising place to shelter from the wrath of the heavens and the suspicious noises. Libraries, you vaguely recall, used to be quiet places, full of thick walls, and, most importantly, sturdy ceilings. The library entrance is a double door of dark wood, surprisingly intact, as if it had an invisible force field against stupidity and vandalism. You push it, hesitantly. It yields with a soft, almost polite creak, and you slip inside, closing it behind you. The contrast with the chaos of the mall is immediate and almost shocking. The sound of the storm is muffled, reduced to a distant murmur. The air inside is still, cool, and carries a scent you'd almost forgotten. The dry, slightly sweet aroma of old paper, book glue, of dusty knowledge. It's the smell of civilization, or at least one of its quieter parts. Shelves upon shelves of books line up in orderly rows, reaching up to the high ceiling. Some sections are a bit messy, a few books fallen, but overall, the place seems to have been miraculously spared from the destruction that swept through the rest of the mall. The light is dim, coming from a few high, dusty windows that filter the fury of the storm outside into a soft, diffuse, almost ecclesiastical glow. It's an unexpected sanctuary in the midst of pandemonium. You walk through the silent aisles, your footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor. It's like entering a tomb, but a pleasant tomb, full of stories instead of bones. You run your fingers along the spines of the books, reading random titles: philosophy, history, poetry, apartment gardening manuals. A particularly cruel irony, you think. So many thoughts, so many ideas, so many lives condensed into words and bound between covers. You sink into a cracked leather armchair in a quiet alcove, your backpack at your feet. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, you feel a pang of something that isn't anxiety or fear. It's a kind of calm, a respite. The world outside may be crumbling, the wind may be howling like a lost soul. But in here, between these walls of silent wisdom, there is an unexpected peace. You pick up a book at random. It's a collection of ancient poetry. You were never much for poetry. In the pre-collapse world, it seemed like a luxury, a frivolity. Now, the words, even if you don't understand all the archaic references, have a weight, a resonance. They speak of love, of loss, of beauty, of despair, things that apparently are timeless and apocalypse-proof. You read for a while, the poet's voice echoing in a forgotten corner of your mind, a gentle counterpoint to the symphony of the storm. As you wander among the shelves, you notice something peculiar. In a far corner, in the philosophy section, there's a small stool, and next to it, an open book, as if someone had been interrupted, mid-read. You approach. The book is Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And, next to the book, distractedly nibbling on the corner of a page, is a rat. A large, fat rat, which stares at you with almost human intelligence before returning its attention to the Nietzschean Superman. You blink. A rat that reads Nietzsche. Or perhaps just appreciates the taste of philosophical paper. Interesting dietary habits, you murmur to the rodent, who seems to ignore you solemnly, as a true intellectual would. You almost laugh. The absurdity of the scene. You, a ragged survivor, the storm outside, and a literary gourmet rat, is almost too much. Perhaps the sleepy chronicler should jot this one down for a future story about the unexpected refinement of post-apocalyptic fauna. It's then that you hear a different sound. Not the rat, not the storm. A soft throat clearing, coming from behind a tall shelf of encyclopedias that look like they've never been opened. Your body tenses again. You're not alone. And, apparently, the Nietzsche reader wasn't motorized rat. Slowly, your heart beginning to race again. You round the shelf, and there he is. An old man, very old, with a white beard that cascades down to his chest like a waterfall of dirty snow, round glasses perched on the tip of his nose, and a gaze that seems to hold all the wisdom and weariness of the world. He's sitting in a makeshift rocking chair made of crates and cushions and holds a different book in his thin, ink-stained hands. He looks at you over his glasses, without surprise, almost with expectation. "Ah," he says, his voice like the rustling of dry pages. "I was wondering when you'd show up. The rat told me we had a visitor. He smiles. A wrinkled, genuine smile. Took you a while to find the poetry section, didn't it? You stand there, dumbfounded, unsure if you're hallucinating from hunger, stress, or a sudden overdose of culture. A guardian, a librarian of the end of the world, and, apparently, one who converses with rodents versed in German philosophy. This day was getting more and more interesting. He, the rat, talks to you? You manage to stammer, feeling like a complete idiot. The old man chuckles. A dry, pleasant sound. Not literally, my young friend, but they are excellent observers, and they have surprisingly sophisticated literary taste, though they tend to prefer the existentialists. Less fibre, perhaps. He gestures to an empty chair near him. Sit. Sit. The storm will last a while, and it's been a long time since I've had anyone to talk to about something other than the best way to patch a roof or the dubious virtues of dandelion soup. He seems harmless, almost fragile, but there's a liveliness in his eyes, a spark of shrewd intelligence that tells you he's survived much more than just a few storms. You sit, still a bit dazed, but strangely calm. Perhaps this unexpected encounter, in this refuge of paper and silence, is exactly what you needed. Or perhaps it's just another bizarre chapter in your increasingly surreal journey. Either way, it seems you have a new and enigmatic conversation partner, at least for now. And, who knows, maybe he has some answers, or at least, some better questions. The conversation with the old librarian, who introduces himself as Elias, stretches on as the storm rages outside, a duet between nature's fury and the calm, resigned wisdom of humanity. He is an inexhaustible source of stories, philosophical quotes, some of which you suspect he invents on the spot, and surprisingly practical observations on how to survive the apocalypse with a library as your only resource. Apparently, knowing the difference between edible mushrooms and those that make you converse with colours is as vital as understanding Plato. Who knew? Elias, with his eyes that seem to have read every book in that place, and also the soul of every lost visitor, doesn't have a magic map to Aurora. He shares Jonas's skepticism, calling such promised places mirages of the hungry mind. However, he has heard the same whispers as you, the same fragmented legends, the shattered mountains. Yes, he murmurs, adjusting his glasses. They say they guard hidden valleys, where the world's madness hasn't reached so deep, and the great river. Well, if there's a river that still deserves the name Great, it's a good place to look for life, don't you think? He doesn't offer you a path, but rather a perspective, and, more crucially, a book. Not one of philosophy or poetry, but an ancient geographical atlas, with yellowed pages and worn edges. This one, he says, pointing to a specific region, east of the ruins of Providence, where a mountain range is drawn with fine lines, and a winding watercourse marked as Grey River on the map snakes towards them. The Grey River. Doesn't sound so grand, but old maps are sometimes modest. Or perhaps the name is a literal description of the water's colour, in which case, good luck. He smiles with that erudite gnome expression of his. If the shattered mountains exist, this river, or what's left of it, should lead you close. The storm subsides as quickly as it arrived, leaving behind a washed world and a silence broken only by dripping water. Elias doesn't ask you to stay, nor does he hurry you to leave. He seems content in his paper fortress, with his intellectual rats and his memories. As you prepare to leave, he hands you a small metal canteen. Clean water, he says, collected from the rain, filtered with techniques the ancient Romans would have envied if they'd had access to coffee filters and nylon stockings, with a thank you that sounds inadequate for the hospitality and the strange sense of peace you found there. You leave the silent library, the battered atlas tucked away like a treasure in your backpack. The Oasis Plaza seems less threatening in the pale light of the post-storm morning. The metallic noise? Probably just the wind, or your overactive imagination. You don't waste time investigating. Following the Grey River becomes your new mantra. Elias's map, though old, is surprisingly useful for basic navigation, more so than the diary's vague instructions about a dry river. The problem is that the Grey River, when you finally find it after another day's walk through wastelands and ghostly forests, lives up to its name in a depressing way. It's not exactly a mighty river. It's more a muddy trickle, a stony bed with occasional pools of a liquid of dubious color and odor. River of doubt and occasional sewage. You mentally dub it, with your characteristic good humor for misfortunes. The journey along this mockery of a watercourse is arduous. The terrain is uneven, covered with loose stones and thorny vegetation that seems to take sadistic pleasure in snagging your clothes and skin. The river water, even filtered with your ingenious system, has a persistent metallic taste, and you drink it with the constant, mild paranoia that your internal organs are secretly organizing a protest. The scarcity of resources begins to become critical. The cans of tuna and crackers from Providence are already a distant memory. Your diet now consists mainly of what you can gather: bitter roots, some wild berries that you test with the caution of a royal taster, and with occasional intestinal regrets, and the ever-present insects, which you've learned to toast until crispy, pretending they're some exotic kind of snack. The glamour of the adventurer's life, you reflect, was clearly overstated by propaganda. Exhaustion, both physical and mental, becomes a constant companion, like a sticky shadow. Your feet ache, your muscles protest, and your mind sometimes wanders down dangerous paths, flirting with the idea of simply sitting down and giving up. But the image of the shattered mountains, the vague promise of aurora, and a stubbornness bordering on stupidity keep you putting one foot in front of the other. You start to see signs that others may have passed this way, or perhaps are following the same desperate route. A recently extinguished campfire, footprints that aren't yours in the mud by the riverbank, the distant glint of a possible campsite at night, which you prudently avoid. Would they be friends? Enemies? Competitors in the race for a paradise that may not even exist? You're in no hurry to find out. Loneliness, though heavy, still seems the safest option. The days drag on, each a small battle against fatigue, hunger, and growing uncertainty. Elias's map keeps you in the general direction, but the mountains still seem like a distant mirage, a blue-grey blur on the horizon that never gets closer. Hope, that stubborn flame, begins to flicker, threatening to be extinguished under the weight of despair. You cling to small rituals, cleaning your knife, checking your traps, still useless, rereading the few legible sentences from the original diary, as if they were a sacred mantra. Then, on an afternoon when the sky is particularly oppressive, and you're seriously considering having a deep conversation with a rock about the meaning of life, something happens. The terrain begins to rise more steeply, the air becomes thinner, colder, and, finally, unmistakably, the first great rock formations of the shattered mountains loom before you, imposing and grim, like the broken teeth of a sleeping giant. You stop, exhausted, but with a new wave of adrenaline coursing through your body. You've arrived. At least, you've reached their base. The joy, however, is quickly tempered by the sight of what lies ahead. An arid, rocky landscape, with narrow passes and gorges that seem to have been carved by despair itself. And, in the midst of that grey vastness, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but undeniable when you focus your gaze, is a small thread of smoke rising lazily towards the sky. Different from the smoke of a casual campfire, it looks more permanent, organized. Could that be it? The first real sign of aurora? Or just another group of survivors battling the mountain cold? There's only one way to find out. The smoke is your beacon. an uncertain guide through the labyrinth of rocks and shadows of the shattered mountains. Each step is a gamble against the treacherous terrain and your own exhaustion, which now seems to have fused with your DNA. But the sight of that delicate plume, rising against the cold, metallic blue sky, is a more potent stimulant than any bitter root you've chewed in recent weeks. It would take almost a full day of careful climbing, skirting cliffs and traversing narrow crevices where the wind howled like a banshee with a toothache, to finally get close enough for a clear view of the smoke's origin. And what you see, my dear listener, isn't exactly the Eden, with air conditioning and unlimited Wi-Fi that some naive part of your brain still dared to imagine. Nestled in a small valley, protected by imposing rock walls, is a cluster of makeshift structures. Shacks made of rusted metal, patched canvas, and salvaged pieces of wood. A high fence, also a patchwork of barbed wire, logs, and who knows what else, encircles the perimeter of what appears to be a settlement. There's a single visible entrance, a gate made of welded metal sheets, which looks like it was torn from an armored truck, and now sports a respectable layer of rust, as if it's been there longer than the mountains themselves. Above it, someone has crudely painted the word Aurora in white, dripping letters, with a small, optimistic sunflower drawn beside it, which looks more like a sick spider. A rusty gate to paradise, with a touch of post-apocalyptic conceptual art. Lovely. Smoke rises from a few chimneys scattered throughout the camp, and you can make out the movement of people inside. Small figures busy with tasks that, from a distance, seem prosaic and almost normal. There's a sense of order, of purpose, that contrasts sharply with the chaos of the outside world. But there's also an aura of isolation, of a besieged fortress. You approach with the same caution you'd use to poke an unfamiliar animal with a short stick. When you're about 100 yards from the gate, a raspy voice, amplified by a megaphone that looks like it's survived several wars, and lost most of them, echoes through the valley. "Stop right there, stranger. Identify yourself and state your business, or the next thing identifying you will be your bullet hole." Ah, mountain hospitality, always so warm. From atop a makeshift watchtower, made of scaffolding and paranoia, you see the silhouette of someone with a long gun pointed in your direction. You stop, slowly raising your hands, trying to look as unthreatening as possible, which is difficult when you're dirty, starving, and probably look like you've just been through hell and asked for takeout. "My name doesn't much matter." You project your voice, trying not to stammer. "I'm just passing through. Heard about this place. Aurora." 1, 2. Silence. Only the wind whistling between the rocks and your heart beating a nervous samba in your chest. Then, the megaphone voice again. "Heard about it, eh? And what did you hear? That we hand out popsicles and free hugs here?" A short, joyless laugh follows. Approach slowly, hands where I can see 'em, and no funny business, or your "just passing through" will be a lot shorter than you imagine. You obey, each step a small prayer that the fellow in the tower doesn't have an itchy trigger finger or a particularly sadistic sense of humor. As you reach the rusty gate, it creaks open just enough for one person to pass, revealing 2 individuals armed with shotguns and glares that would make a vulture uncomfortable. They are rough, suspicious, dressed in a mixture of worn civilian clothes and makeshift military gear. The official scent of the place seems to be a blend of sweat, gun oil, and boiled cabbage. A classic. What follows is an interrogation that would make a secret police agent proud. Questions about where you came from, where you're going, if you even know yourself, if you know anyone inside, if you have any contagious diseases, besides the obvious lack of bathing, and the most important one of all, what you have to offer. Because, as you soon realize, Aurora is not a charity. It's a system of exchange, of mutual survival, based on utility. If you have nothing of value, skills, supplies, information, then you're just another hungry mouth to feed, a dead weight. You offer what little you have, a few tools you manage to salvage, your knowledge, limited, but better than nothing, of improvised medicinal plants, and the story of your journey, strategically omitting the more bizarre details. Like librarians who converse with philosophical rats, they search you, temporarily confiscate final argument, and your crossbow, which leaves you feeling uncomfortably naked, and lead you into the settlement. The first impression of Aurora, from the inside, is anticlimactic. There are no streets paved with gold, nor angels singing on harps made of sunbeams. It's a functional, austere place, with a persistent smell of confined humanity. Small vegetable patches are cultivated on any available piece of land, protected by low fences. There's a rainwater collection system, and a buzz of activity. People mending tools, cooking over communal fires, tending to children who play with pieces of junk as if they were the most expensive toys in the world. The inhabitants are an eclectic mix. Some look like they've stepped straight out of a Mad Max nightmare, with hardened gazes and scars that tell silent stories. Others just look tired. Families, solitary individuals, all united by need and the fragile hope this place represents. The rules are clear and visible on crudely painted signs. Work or don't eat. Theft is punished by exile, or worse. Keep your trash and your opinions to yourself. A paradise of brutal efficiency. You are brought before an older woman, with grey hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that have seen it all twice. Her name is Martha, and she appears to be the unofficial mayor, judge, and executioner of Aurora. She listens to you in silence, her face impassive, as you repeat your story. Aurora isn't a refuge, kid, she says finally, her voice firm but not unkind. It's a daily struggle. Here, everyone pulls their weight. If you're willing to work, to contribute, maybe there's a place for you. If you're looking for a walk in the park, the door you came in through still works for leaving. Disappointment, if there ever was any real hope, settles like dust at the bottom of your soul. It's not paradise, it's just another place, with its own rules, its own problems, its own hierarchies, maybe a little safer than the open road, maybe with slightly more regular food, but the freedom of solitude, however dangerous, had its own appeal. Martha assigns you to a temporary job, helping to reinforce a section of the outer fence that was damaged by a rock slide. It's hard work under the merciless mountain sun, with little food and even less friendly conversation. But you work, because that's the currency here. You observe, learn the dynamics of the place, the exchanged glances, the unspoken tensions simmering beneath the surface of this organized community. There are factions, resentments, and the constant fear of the world outside, and perhaps also of what lies within. Security, you begin to suspect, comes at a price that goes beyond manual labor, and the secrets of Aurora, like its rocky foundations, seem to be many and well buried. The days in Aurora turn into a routine of hard work, rationed food, and a social vigilance that would make a reality show look like a silent monk retreat. You fixed the fence, which earned you the right not to be immediately expelled. A big step up Aurora's social ladder, comparable to being knighted in less dusty times. Your new job, assigned by the ever-pragmatic Martha, is digging latrines. Yes, latrines. Apparently your face, which screamed, "I've seen a lot of crap in my life," qualified you for advanced basic sanitation. It's a job that ensures a certain social distance, which, honestly, you don't consider a total disadvantage. And, as an ironic bonus, it gives you plenty of time to contemplate the depths of human existence. Literally. Communal living, you quickly discover, is a euphemism for trying not to strangle your neighbors over the last turnip or the annoying way they chew. Aurora, despite its poetic name and the dubious sunflower at the gate, is a microcosm of old humanity. With all its glorious flaws and petty heroics, there are the incurable optimists who insist on planting flowers in empty ammunition cans and singing songs about a bright future that seems to have taken a permanent vacation. There are the taciturn pragmatists, like Martha, who keep the place running on iron rules and stern glares. And there are the inevitable freeloaders, those who always seem to have a little more of everything and a ready excuse not to share. You observe them with the cynical detachment of an anthropologist studying a particularly dysfunctional tribe. Aurora's rules are many, and at times seem to have been written by a bureaucrat with a particularly sadistic sense of humor. Water rationing is strict, resulting in heated debates about who used an extra milliliter in their bath, which consists of a cup of cold water and a lot of imagination. Food, painstakingly grown in the gardens or hunted on the dangerous slopes, is distributed in portions that make you fondly remember your insect diet days. Any dispute, however minor, is brought to Martha, who presides over a sort of informal court where justice is swift, usually efficient, and completely devoid of lawyers or appeals. You saw a man exiled for stealing 3 potatoes. Apparently, carbohydrates were taken very seriously around here. Your shackmates, you were allocated a particularly drafty corner of a structure that looks like it was once a glorified chicken coop, are an older couple, Elara and Finn, who lost everything out there and now cling to Aurora's routine as if it were the last lifeboat. Elara occasionally offers you some dubious-tasting herbal tea, while Finn regales you with long, detailed stories about how much better things were before, when the biggest problem was traffic or the credit card bill. You listen patiently, because the alternative is silence, or the sound of your own stomach rumbling in protest. There are moments of unexpected solidarity, of course. When one of the children falls ill, the community pulls together, sharing the few available medicines and taking turns caring for them. When a hunting party returns with a deer, a rare event celebrated like a national holiday, the meat is meticulously divided, and for one night, there's an almost festive atmosphere, with stories told around the campfire and even some laughter that doesn't sound forced. It's these small glimpses of humanity that stop you from completely dismissing Aurora as just another prison with a slightly better fence. But the tensions are always there, simmering beneath the surface like a geyser about to erupt. Constant scarcity creates an environment of mistrust. Who's hoarding more than their share? Who isn't working hard enough? Little cliques form, rumors spread faster than any disease. You learn to navigate this social minefield with the subtlety of an elephant in a china shop, usually opting for silence, and a facial expression you hope conveys, "I'm harmless and slightly stupid. Please don't involve me in your dramas." Your personal dilemma deepens. The solitude of the road was dangerous, but simple. Here there's relative safety, a promise of food, however little and bland. But there's also the constant pressure to conform, to fit in. Your individuality, your natural skepticism, seem like suspicious qualities in a place that values obedience and communal effort above all else. You find yourself wondering if the freedom to starve alone wasn't, in a way, preferable to the security of slowly withering in a group where you'll never truly feel at home. Human problems, you note with a twinge of dark humor, are incredibly persistent. Even without pizza delivery or the internet to fuel arguments, people still find ways to annoy each other, to compete, to form hierarchies. It's almost comforting in its depressing predictability. One night, as you're in your corner of the chicken coop, trying to ignore Finn's snoring and the smell of cabbage that seems to permeate even your dreams, you hear raised voices outside. Not a common argument about water rationing. There's a tone of urgency, of fear. You sneak to a crack in the wall. A group of residents is gathered around Martha, gesturing, their voices low but tense. You manage to catch fragments, fresh tracks, Many of them. The Eastern Patrol hasn't returned. A cold chill runs down your spine. Threat. An external threat, which, in Aurora, is always the worst kind. The constant fear of the world outside, which they tried to keep at bay with their fence and their rules, seem to have found a way in, or at least very close. The fragile stability of Aurora, built on rocks and despair, suddenly seems about to be tested in a way that not even the strictest rationing rule could have foreseen. And you, the newcomer latrine digger, might be about to find out if Aurora's buried secrets include an evacuation plan, or just more space for new graves. The news of the missing patrol and the suspicious tracks spreads through Aurora like wildfire in dry grass. Fear, once a constant murmur beneath the surface of community life, now screams at the top of its lungs. That facade of order and routine that Martha worked so hard to maintain begins to crack under the pressure. Discussions about water rationing are suddenly forgotten, replaced by heated debates and anxious whispers about what, or who, is out there on the dark slopes of the shattered mountains. You, the official latrine digger and resident cynical observer, find yourself dragged into the center of the growing hysteria, even if only as a silent witness. The gatherings around the main campfire become more frequent and more tense. Martha, with her granite face and firm voice, tries to maintain calm, but even she seems to have lost some of her usual unshakable authority. "We need facts, not panic," she repeats, but her eyes betray a concern she can't completely hide. The fresh tracks indicate a large group, many of them, as the scouts, who returned pale and breathless, said, and the Eastern Patrol, 3 of Aurora's most experienced hunters, still hasn't shown any sign of life. Theories range from the pessimistic to the downright apocalyptic. Could they be raiders, the dreaded mountain crows you'd heard whispers about, an unknown wild tribe? Or something worse, something the old world legends would call, well, best not to think about it. Imagination, when fueled by fear and hunger, is a very creative cook. Preparations for whatever is coming begin chaotically, and then, under the reluctant organization of Martha and some of the more pragmatic veterans, take on a more organized form, if you can call a desperate effort by a band of ill-equipped survivors that the fence is reinforced, not just the section you helped repair, but the entire perimeter. Weapons are cleaned and distributed, old shotguns, rusty pistols, makeshift bows and arrows, and even some spears that look like they came out of a B-movie about the Stone Age. You get your final argument and your questionable crossbow back, which gives you minimal comfort. At least, if you're going to die, you'll die with your own tools of questionable effectiveness. Your role in the crisis is, initially, the same as always, digging. But this time, it's not latrines. It's shallow trenches behind the fence, defensive positions that seem pathetically inadequate against any serious threat. As you dig, you observe the community dynamics transform. Fear has the curious effect of uniting some people and tearing others apart. You see alliances forming, old rivalries being set aside in the name of mutual survival, and you also see selfishness flourish, with some trying to hide food or find a way to escape before the worst happens. It's human nature in its rawest, least photogenic state. In one of the meetings, while they discuss options, fight, flee, try to negotiate with an unknown threat, an idea quickly dismissed as naive suicide, you, to your own surprise, open your mouth. Maybe it's the boredom of digging. Maybe it's the feeling that cynical silence won't keep you alive this time. If there are many of them, and if they're organized enough to make an experienced patrol disappear, you say, your voice sounding firmer than you expected, they probably know this valley. They know we're here. Fighting in a surrounded position against an enemy superior in numbers, and possibly in equipment is. You pause, searching for the right word. statistically inadvisable. Some look at you with hostility, the newbie offering opinions. Others, including Martha, stare at you with a new intensity. "And what would be your brilliant suggestion, pit digger?" asks one of the more truculent hunters, a man named Kale, who never seemed to like you much. "I don't have a brilliant suggestion," you admit, "but I've seen places like this wiped off the map because they thought their walls were high enough. Maybe we should know what we're fighting against before we decide to die for a handful of turnips and a rusty gate." Your gaze falls on the map Elias gave you, which you still carry. There are other passes in these mountains. More difficult, yes, but perhaps less obvious. The idea of abandoning Aurora, even temporarily, is met with horror by some, and with a glimmer of cautious hope by others. The discussion heats up. Martha, surprisingly, considers your observation. She knows you're an outsider, but she also knows you survived alone for a long time out there, which gives you a kind of credential that many of Aurora's residents, too safe behind their fences, don't possess. In the following days, the tension mounts. Extra lookouts are posted. The nights are filled with the sound of the wind, and Aurora's collective imagination conjuring horrors in the shadows. And then, the threat materializes. Not as a frontal assault, but more insidiously. One of the lookouts finds a body, one of the members of the missing patrol, left a visible distance from the fence, like a warning or an invitation. Panic threatens to take over, but Martha, with a will of steel, maintains order. A small scouting team, including Kale, who now looks at you with a little less contempt and a little more reluctant respect. And, to your surprise, you apparently, your ability to observe and keep quiet has been noted, is sent to investigate the tracks more carefully, to try to identify the enemy. What you discover is unsettling. They aren't the mountain crows, nor some random wild tribe. The tracks are from military boots, and there are signs of discipline, of tactics. An organized, well-equipped group, clearly sweeping the region. Why? No one knows, but they are approaching. The decision is made on a cold, starry night, with the spectre of the threat looming over the valley. Aurora will prepare for the worst, but it will also prepare an escape route, a partial evacuation of the most vulnerable, children, the elderly, the injured, to a more hidden location in the mountains, following some of the passes you indicated on Elias's map. It's a risky, desperate plan, but it's a plan. You find yourself involved in the preparations, no longer just digging, but helping to organize the few supplies, plan the routes, trying to calm the most frightened with your dark humor and practical resignation. At least, you tell Alara, who is crying softly, "If we have to run, we're already used to not having much to carry." The crisis isn't an epic confrontation with explosions and war cries. It's a series of difficult decisions, silent sacrifices, of fear and hope battling for space in everyone's heart. Some decide to stay and fight to the end to protect the little they've built. Others, with heavy hearts, prepare to abandon Aurora, taking with them only the essentials and the uncertainty of the future. When the dust, literal and metaphorical, begins to settle after days of tension and the successful, and, thankfully, undetected, evacuation of part of the community, the unidentified threat seems to have passed by, skirting Aurora's valley, perhaps in search of larger or easier targets. Or maybe the simple demonstration that they were being watched, and that the place wouldn't be an easy prey dissuaded them. No one knows for sure. But, for now, Aurora has survived. Wounded, diminished, but it survived. A new, grimmer normality sets in. The sense of security, however fragile, has been shaken. The community is smaller, more suspicious, but also, in a way, more united by the ordeal they faced together. You, the outsider, the latrine digger, have earned a new kind of respect, albeit reluctant. Your observations, your unexpected knowledge of the terrain, helped. And as you watch Aurora's campfires burning that night, under an indifferent sky, a question hangs in the air, heavier than the smoke. What now? Is Aurora still the best place for you? Or was this last scare the final push you needed to move on, to continue your search for something that may not even exist, but still calls to you from beyond the mountains? The answer, you feel, is slowly forming, like a scar that defines the future. The dust of the recent crisis settles slowly over Aurora, both literal and metaphorical. The smaller, more cautious community licks its wounds and, with stubborn resilience, resumes the routine of survival. The trenches you helped dig still mark the perimeter like fresh scars, a constant reminder of the fragility of that small bastion of humanity. Your status, curiously, has changed. You're no longer just the latrine digger. Now you're the outsider who didn't run, or the one who understands old maps and doesn't panic easily. It's a kind of reluctant respect, expressed more in nods than in words, but noticeable. Even Kale, the truculent hunter, shares a piece of roasted meat with you without much grumbling, which, in Aurora's social code, is equivalent to a medal for bravery. You resume your tasks, which now include not only maintaining collective hygiene, an endless job, as you sarcastically observe to yourself, but also helping to plan patrol routes and reinforce weak points in the valley's defense. Martha consults you occasionally, not as a leader, but as someone whose outsider perspective has proven valuable. It's a subtle change, but one that doesn't go unnoticed. And yet, as the days turn into weeks, a familiar restlessness begins to stir within you. Aurora, with its precarious safety and rigid rules, starts to feel less like a refuge and more like a cage, albeit a cage with, almost, regular meals. The crisis united the community, but it also exposed its fissures, its deepest fears. You see the weariness in people's eyes, the resignation of those who traded the uncertain freedom of the road for the predictable, but limited, survival of the valley. You begin to take stock, not of supplies, but of feelings, of experiences. The journey so far has been a blur of dangers, small victories, and great disappointments. You survived. You learned to read the world's signs, to trust your instincts and your crowbar. You met strange road companions, some hostile, others surprisingly kind, like the old librarian Elias and his faith in books, or even the small, functional family at the train station. And now, Aurora, a place that offered you a roof, leaky but a roof, and a purpose, smelly but a purpose. But was this it? Was this the something more you were looking for when you left your overturned school bus behind? The answer, you suspect, is a complicated, maybe, but probably not. Aurora's safety is real. To a certain extent, the community, despite its flaws, offers a semblance of belonging. You even rediscovered the almost forgotten pleasure of a pair of relatively clean socks, courtesy of Alara, who mended them for you with impressive skill. A luxury that, in retrospect, is worth more than much of the old world's gold. One particularly clear night, with the stars of the shattered mountains shining like diamond shards on black velvet, you find yourself talking with Martha near the main campfire. The flames crackle, casting dancing shadows on the tired faces around. You've been quiet, more than usual, she observes bluntly. Martha isn't the type to waste time on subtleties. Just thinking, you reply. About staying or about leaving? You shrug. A bit of both, I guess. Aurora gave me shelter, a place. But I don't know if it's my place. Martha nods slowly, her eyes fixed on the flames. Few of us chose this place kid. We were pushed into it. For some, it's the end of the line, the best they can hope for. For others, she looks at you. It's just a stop, a pause to breathe before moving on. She sighs. I won't ask you to stay. You've already done more for Aurora than many who were born nearby. But know that, if you decide your path is here, there's work to be done. And maybe, just maybe, a future. Her words hang in the air. A future. A word so laden with possibilities. And, at the same time, so frighteningly empty. In the days that follow, the decision ripens within you, like a wild berry finally ready to be picked or to rot on the branch. You watch Aurora's children playing, their laughter echoing through the valley, oblivious to the precariousness of their existence. You see Alara and Finn tending their small garden with a touching dedication. You see the determination in Martha's eyes as she deals with another dispute over seed distribution. There is life here. There is struggle. There is a stubbornness to continue. That is, in its own way, admirable. But there is also the horizon. That horizon which, even from the depths of Aurora's valley, still seems to whisper empty promises, or perhaps just the simple, irresistible song of the open road, of the unknown. The search for Aurora, the mythical place, may have ended here, in this imperfect valley that bears its name. But the search for something more, that seems to be a chronic condition of your soul. You don't make a formal announcement. There are no emotional farewells. On a cold morning, before the sun crests the ridges of the shattered mountains, you pack your bag, now a little fuller than when you arrived, thanks to Aurora's cautious generosity. You leave behind the small wooden bird Eli gave you, carefully placed on your empty mat in the old chicken coop. A small thank you, a silent remembrance. Your tools, final argument, and the crossbow are back with you. As you pass through the rusty gate, the morning guard, a young man you helped train in handling a bow, just nods, a tacit understanding in his eyes. No questions, no attempt to stop you. You pause for a moment at the top of the trail leading out of the valley, looking back at the smoke beginning to rise from Aurora's chimneys, a sign that another day of struggle and survival has begun. There is no sadness, no regret, just a quiet acceptance. Aurora was a chapter, an important one, but not the end of the story. You turn and face east, where the sun begins to paint the sky with the same colors of promise and danger that have accompanied you from the start. What lies beyond the shattered mountains? The great river, perhaps? Other communities? More dangers? Probably all of that, and then some. The journey isn't over. Maybe it never ends. Maybe the real Aurora isn't a place, but the search itself, the stubbornness to keep walking, to keep looking, even when everything around you screams for you to stop. With a final breath, feeling the cold mountain air fill your lungs, you take the first step towards the unknown. Once more, the horizon still rumbles its promises, and you, my dear listener, are still willing to listen to them, one tired but determined, step at a time. And so, our character finds their way, or perhaps just the beginning of a new one. May your own dreams be peaceful, and your worries dissolve with the night. If this story brought you a moment of peace, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe so you don't miss the next Chronicles, and share it with those who also need to relax. Comment below what you thought of this journey, or what kind of adventure you'd like to hear next. Good night, and sleep well.